Boker Tov, good morning and welcome to Monday morning. Today is September 13th and we're learning the Chassidic Heritage series as we're progressing through this textbook, through this text called Garments of the Soul from the Chassidic Heritage series. It's available online on Amazon or at kahatonline.com. This beautiful text is based on a story which we're told about in the Torah. A story that when you read about it, it doesn't seem like it's anything more than an exciting historical narrative. But when you learn it through the lens of Chabad Chassidic philosophy, everything changes. This discourse taught by the Rebbe on the anniversary of his arrival in the United States of America, together with his wife, from the flames of Europe, in the year 1900, sets the tone of the spiritual service of American Jewry. Of course, the Rebbe makes a profound paradigm shift that the spies of Moses, who were sent to conquer the promised, not to conquer, but to scout out and prepare the land for conquering, to set the stage for the conquest of the land of Canaan into the promised land. That setting is not just the conquest of the geographical land of Israel, but also of the spiritual land of Israel, the spiritual land of Canaan, which is our. Each and every one of us were sent into this world with not one but two souls. We are a godly soul that also has an animal soul chained, tethered to it. Every single one of us has two souls, a godly soul and an animal soul. And we've got to learn to coexist, but not only to coexist, but also to be able to prevail. Just like a horse and a rider need to learn to work together, that the rider is able to ride on the horse and not the other way around. Not imagine a horse riding the rider. It would just be absurd and painful. So too, the animal soul has got to serve the godly soul and not the other way around. The question, just to recap, of how this is supposed to happen is the debate between Moses and Joshua in the two biblical accounts. Moses sends spies to the land of Israel, as does his successor Joshua, 40 years later. The difference is that Moses sends them to the entirety of the land of Israel, the entirety of the land of 7 nations. Joshua sends them only to the city of Jericho. And in this discourse, the Rebbe explains that the 7 nations represent the 7 emotions, which represent the essence of the animal soul. Because Moses challenged his people to transform the very essence of their emotion from bad to good, from animalistic to altruistic, from self-serving to God-serving. Who we are is how we feel. Who you are is how you feel. It's what defines you. Your emotions is what defines you. Your emotions is the core, the essence, the foundation of your soul. Jericho, on the other hand, the spies of Joshua's destination, represents not the essence of the soul, but the garments of the soul. How we choose to express our emotions, and that is only through the 3 platforms of thought, speech, and action. Thought, speech, and action express and dress the soul when the soul wants to engage with the outside. You can think consciously about an emotion, you can talk about it, or you can act upon it. So when Joshua sends his spies to the city of Jericho, good morning, Marty, Robert, and Dan. Steve is with me in the live audience, and Harry, as well as David Starr, is with us on YouTube. Wonderful. These are the people that I'm aware of. Everybody else that's live and later, shalom, and thank you for joining me here. Feel free to send me an email to rabbi@jewishgardens.com with comments, feedback, or critique. That's rabbi@jewishgardens.com. So, Jericho represents the garments of the soul, which Joshua is where Joshua sends the spies to. The difference is Moses' mission is to instruct the Jews for all time to be able to change the essence of who you are. if you're selfish, narcissistic, hedonistic, nasty, you can change that, says Moses. You can change the essence of your soul. Joshua's successor says, I'm sorry, but you can't do that. You cannot change your essence. You cannot change your soul. You can only change how you behave, think, and speak. You can only change the clothing that you wear, but you cannot change the essence of your soul. This is expressed by, this truth is expressed, this debate is expressed in the interesting fact that the spies of Moses were not endorsed by God, whereas the spies of Joshua were endorsed by God. What does that mean? A mission endorsed by God means that it's commanded by God, that God wants us to do that. And God doesn't want us to do something that we don't have the tools to achieve. So God will not send an ordinary Jew on a mission to transform his 7 emotions, because a Jew is not being given that capacity to transform your emotions. That is what the Tanya calls the level of a tzaddik, of a righteous Jew, which can only be reached with divine assistance. We try as hard as we can to reach perfection, to reach self-mastery through controlling our thought, speech, and action. And should God choose to give us divine assistance, to literally throw us a rope and pull us in, that's how you become a tzaddik. That's basic Tanya. That's why God doesn't endorse Moses' spies' mission to the 7 nations, because a Jew cannot on his own transform and conquer his animal soul, the 7 emotions. However, the spies of Joshua are endorsed by God, are sent by God, because every single Jew is indeed commanded to conquer his Jericho, to conquer his thought, speech, and action, his garments of his soul, because you can control what you consciously think about, you can control what you talk about, and you can control what you act upon, how you behave. That's why that's a divine command. And that is the mission of American Jewry. The spiritual service of American Jewry, as unspiritual as it sounds, is focused on thought, speech, and action, on the bottom line. It's not about what's going on inside of your heart. In fact, the Rebbe is telling us it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter if you're a raging narcissist, if you don't believe in God, if you're an atheist, agnostic, or something else. What matters is how you act, think, and speak. That's what matters. So you're an atheist. No, you don't believe in God. Guess what? God believes in you. So you don't believe in God, but you show up in shul, late tefillin. You're a narcissist? Give tzedakah. Don't worry about how you feel. You know, we talk about authenticity. We talk about being true to yourself. We talk about coming out of the closet and sharing how you really feel. You know what this world would look like if everybody was to share with others exactly how they feel on the inside? Achenvei. Some people think that that's the right way to go, but it's a disaster. It's an absolute calamity. They bring the house down together with themselves. Like Steve says, Shalonida, we should never know. Unfortunately, we do know some people. Some people, they just feel the obligation to lahazrim, to share whatever goes on in their minds. It's an absolute disaster. But you can't do that. You know, you don't walk around naked. Well, maybe in the name of authenticity, you should walk around naked. I guess they already do. I guess that they already do, right? And then they demonstrate. They say, why should it's just my body? It's my body. It's my body. I should be able to wear my body however I want, right? Achenvei. You need garments. You need the garments of the soul to be able to express the soul. Now, where we're going today, and we're getting close to finishing this discourse with the second last chapter here, chapter 5. The Rebbe is now going to get into, on page 32, if you have the textbook. Page 32 is a great book to have at home, to keep at home, to read, review, reflect, to meditate. Powerful stuff. So in chapter 5, the Rebbe is going to explain why is it that the divine service of American Jewry is focused on the garments of the soul and not on the essence of the soul. Why is it that we're capable of transforming our Jericho, of controlling our thought, speech, and action, but we are incapable of controlling our 7 emotions? And here the Rebbe explains because he focuses on the fact that they're called garments. They're called garments. What is a garment? A garment is something which you can freely change. You can robe and disrobe. You can put on a beautiful suit, and you can take it off and wear pajamas or bathing suit. Or as you say in South Africa, a swimming costume. You can dress up like a clown or a policeman. You can dress up like the President of the United States of America, or you can dress up like a vagrant. You have the capacity to wear whatever the heck you want. But if you don't like your body, you can't change it. I caught myself because I said, if you don't like your nose, you can't change it. I guess today you can play with it. I don't know what it's going to look like when you're done with it. But there's a reason why they call the official name for plastic surgery is rhinoplasty, right? I think it was Seinfeld who says, you don't need to add insult to injury by calling the guy a rhino. But you can't really change your body. Certainly if you have an illness or a condition, if you're overweight, if you're high metabolism, low metabolism, short, you're tall, you can't really change that. You can't change who you are, but you can change how you dress. And that's the reason why you can control your thought, speech, and action, but you cannot control your 7 emotions. When somebody tells you that he just bought a beautiful house and you feel jealous on the inside, you can't control the jealousy that you feel, the envy, but you can control what you actively, consciously think about. Are you going to focus about the jealousy? Are you going to go home and talk to your wife about how jealous you are about this house that he bought? Or are you going to not think about the jealousy? Are you going to talk to your wife about how happy you are? Are you going to fake it until you make it, right? It's a very profound theme, which is going to be right at the end of this discourse, how the garments actually change the inside. We'll talk about that at the end. But the reason why you can control and conquer your Jericho, and the reason why you cannot control and conquer your 7 nations, is because these are garments and this is essence. You can't change your body, but you can change your garments. Rob Berger, the rule for when to speak is, does this need to be said? Does this need to be said by me? And does this need to be said by me now? Beautiful, Rob. It's really beautiful. Very, very nice. The Talmud says, shtika. No, mila besela, shtika betre. Mila besela, which means for one speech, I'll give you a sela, which is like a coin. What? No, sela means a coin. It's currency. For one speech, I'll give you a coin. But for shtika, but for silence, I'll give you 2. Which means silence is double as important than speech. That's why you were created with 1 mouth and 2 ears, because you're supposed to be doing double the listening than the speaking, right? Very, very beautiful point you raised over there, Rob. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so this is the theme of what we're going to learn about today, about why it is that we're able to control the garments of our soul. And when you meditate upon this idea, friends, when you meditate upon this idea, it's such a beautiful manifestation of an abstract idea. When you think of your thought, speech, and action as a garment, which we're about to do right now, then what happens is that you start to become in control of your machine. Imagine you buy yourself a fancy schmancy new car, and you just don't know how any other buttons work. You just know how to turn it on and how to steer. That's it. It's like a waste. It's a waste. You bought this schmancy car. It can probably, I don't know what it can, fancy things that it can do, but you don't know how to work it. What's the point? You buy yourself a fancy new phone, and you don't know how anything works other than how to talk and how to have a phone call. It's a shanda. Same thing with this body. You have this beautiful body, the most complex piece of machinery ever created. Even Steve Jobs couldn't create something as sophisticated as the human body. Yet, what do? We don't know how to control it. That's what this discourse is. That's what Chassidus is doing. That's what Chabad, Chassidus, and Tanya is doing, is that it's opening our eyes to the tools that are at our disposal when meditating upon the following idea, the chapter 5 of this discourse. And you realize that thought, speech, and action are your garments, and they are able to be robed and disrobed freely at your will. You realize 2 things. First of all, I'm responsible for what I do, for what I say, and what I think about. Changes your perspective on Yom Kippur and your Teshuvah and your Al-Chait. When you stand before Hashem on Yom Kippur, you're like, you know what? I actually am responsible for what comes out of my mouth. I am supposed to think before I speak. I actually am responsible for my thoughts. Not only for my actions, I think we all agree to that. But I'm responsible for my words, and I'm responsible for my thoughts as well. I think in America, it's well accepted that you're responsible for your actions. Except if you've got a good lawyer who can prove that you had temporary insanity or permanent insanity, or maybe you were abused as a child and therefore your actions you're not responsible for your actions. I'm not sure the limits of that legal limitation there. But we generally, I think we can all agree that you're responsible for your actions. But do we agree that you're responsible for your words? I didn't hurt anybody. I just said words, right? Loose lips sink ships, right? Do we agree that words you're responsible for your words? I think that there's such a thing as character assassination. There's defamation. There's libel, right? Are you able to be sent to jail for libel? Not. You don't think so? Well, if the lawyers here could comment, maybe Rob Berger, if you can give us some insight in that. What?
Money.
Money. What about money?
It's not no.
You don't go to jail, but you could.
Yeah, but
you can sue. Oh, so you can sue for money. Good morning, Robert Saunders. Nice to see you, man. Thank you again for what you did for us at the show, for making the show so beautiful for Yantiv. So libel is maybe something you can sue financially for, but you don't go to jail. Why? Because we don't think that you're necessarily responsible for your speech. And that's the news flash today, is that you are responsible for your thoughts, for your speech. But can you imagine if somebody sued his friend for thinking bad thoughts about him? You'd laugh it off. Say, take someone to court for thinking bad thoughts about you. Well, guess what? Next week, you're going to stand in court this week, you're going to stand in court before Master of the universe, the God, the King of Kings, the Master Judge, Hashem, and he's going to judge your thoughts. Yes, because they're your garments. Some garments might be closer to your body than other garments. You might have an overcoat, a raincoat, a trench coat, which is your actions. And you might have an undershirt or socks, which is your thought, because it's more subtle, less visible, closer to your body, to your person. But it doesn't mean that you're not responsible for it. Of course, you're responsible for it. If you decide to put on a what do they call them, a bomb belt, what do they call it, dynamite, suicide vest. Just because it's hidden, it doesn't mean that it's not your responsibility. Of course, it's your responsibility. You're responsible for thought, speech, and action. And that's exactly what we're going to cover in chapter 5. Let's take a look inside the text of page 32. The reason for this, the reason for thought, speech, and action being within man's control, unlike the emotions of the heart, the reason you can control your Jericho and not your 7 nations is because thought, speech, and deed are the garments of the soul. Therefore, just as with regard to the garments of the body, although man needs clothing for the purposes of modesty, like Adam and Eve were shamed, and also for the purpose of protecting himself from the cold and the heat. So even though you need clothing, nevertheless, he can remove them. You can choose to not to wear those clothes, but these clothes. You can choose to shop not in Zara, but in Boss, or somewhere else, and not in Bloomingdale's, but in Macy's. You can choose to wear new clothes or old clothes. Nevertheless, he can remove them, and he certainly does not need these particular clothing that he's wearing now, and he can exchange them for others. Similarly, with regards to the garments of the soul, just like it is with physical clothing, so too it is with your soul clothing. So it's time we get to view our soul as a real part of ourselves, like we view our body. We expended a disproportionate amount of effort and time and attention on our bodies, and much less on our souls. We got all sorts of doctors for our bodies, but we don't begin to know which doctor to turn to for our soul. We hydrate and feed our bodies with all sorts of foods and drink, but do we even know where to begin with how to feed our soul? Let's get real with our soul as well if you want to be happy. Similarly, with regard to the garments of the soul, the garment, speech, and deed can be shed. Speech and action can be shed. You can just not talk, and you can just not do anything. That's shedding, that's disrobing those 2 garments. And even thought, which you cannot shed, you cannot stop thinking ever. This is in contrast to other meditative groups that believe that you can think about nothing. You cannot think. And I've always argued with them and said, you cannot do that. You think that you're sitting over there staring at a wall, thinking about nothing, when in reality you're thinking about the color of the paint, the smell of the paint, the nail that's protruding, the color of the white. You're thinking about something. As much as you think that you're not thinking, you are thinking. So even thought, which is constantly active and cannot be shed, it's like a skin that you can't take off. Nevertheless, it can be replaced with a different thought. So though you have to wear the garment of thought always, nevertheless, you don't have to wear this thought. You can wear a different thought, as long as there's always a thought. So when you're thinking the thought of jealousy, or the thought of envy, or the thought of hatred, or the thought of anger, you don't have to think any of the above. You can think a thought of joy. You can think a thought of gratitude, a thought of peace, a thought of kindness. You don't have to think the thought that just rises up in your emotion, because you're not a slave to your emotion. Your emotion serves you, not the other way around. You know, here we are. We think that we have smartphones that are at our beck. How do you say? At our beck and
call.
Beck and call. You think that the smartphone is at your beck and call, when really you're at the beck and call of the smartphone. Here you are. You're talking to your wife, your spouse, your children, and suddenly the smartphone makes a burp, and that's the end of the conversation. Boop. You're suddenly invested into some, I don't know what, some useless piece of information that showed up on your screen, and that's the end of the conversation. And you just shattered the heart of your 6-year-old. We think that we're in charge of our phones, that our phones serve us. Really, we serve our phones. And the same thing goes for our souls as well. Are you in control of your soul, or is your soul in control of you? Are you in control of your emotions, or are your emotions in control of you? Are you like an instinctive animal that he does whatever he feels like? Or are you like a conscious human being that overrides and overrules his instinct and emotion to do what's right, not just what cropped up in his heart or mind at that moment? Like some sort of a pop-up that shows up on your screen. You don't click on every pop-up that shows up on your screen. On every ad, oh, there's an ad, I better go in. You don't do that with every pop-up on your screen. So why should you do that with every pop-up inside of your heart and mind? Similarly, with regard to the garments of the soul. The garment, speech, and deed can be shed. Even thought, which is constantly active and cannot be shed, can be replaced with a different thought. It's a garment. You can switch it. You can't divest of it, but you can change it to a different thought. But man's intellect and emotions are the soul itself. We learned in Tanya, there's 10 spheros, 10 windows of expressions. The spheros means sapphires, like a luminous, precious stone, like windows on a screen. Our 10 emotions, our 10 sephiros, are 10 attributes, are 10 windows of expression. 3 are intellectual, 7 are emotional. The 3 intellectual ones are Chabad, Chachma, Bina, Das, idea, understanding, and realization. And the 7 emotions are, we've been through this many times, kindness, strictness, compassion, triumph, humility, connection, and communication. Those are the 7 emotions, and the 3 intellectual attributes. Together they make up 10 attributes, 10 spheros, 10 sapphires, 10 windows of expression. They are the essence of your soul, and man's intellect and emotions are the soul itself, and hence much effort, even a special assistance from above, is necessary in order to change them. You cannot change your soul on your own. With divine assistance, yes. Like we learned in Tanya, if you want to become a tzaddik, only by invitation from above, when God reaches out to you and he holds you by the hand and he lifts you up, that's when you can become a tzaddik. You can change your emotions, you can change your intellect. But on your own, you cannot do that. And that, my friends, is how we're supposed to view our soul. Just like we have a very, very clear understanding of our body. I have my body and I have my garments, very clear, right? So too with my soul. Today, hopefully, we've got a very clear distinction between my soul and the garments of my soul. Those that I can control and those that I can't. I see Elaine is saying you're not allowed to yell fire in a crowded theater. You can't just say, well, I just said fire. I didn't hurt anybody. I just said fire. No, you caused a stampede. And that's why you're liable for manslaughter. I'm sure. Right? If somebody died, you're liable for manslaughter because you said fire. So you are responsible for your words. But you're also responsible for your thoughts. Thank you, Elaine. That's very insightful. Good. And with this, friends, I'm going to end today's discussion. where next week, on Wednesday, we're going to be doing Kaparis, Erev Yom Kippur. We're going to be doing the redemption of Kaparis. What? This week, Wednesday, we're not going to be studying because on Wednesday, we're going to be doing Kaparis after the morning services. With money, we're going to be turning the money of our head as a redemption for our soul. But on next week, I think Monday, we'll finish this discourse and we'll move on to the next discourse. So we'll do chapter 6, in which, just a quick teaser, in chapter 6, the Rebbe is going to give us a beautiful, beautiful, game-changing insight, which says that your clothing changes how you feel on the inside. When you're dressed like a policeman, you feel official. And when you're dressed in your pajamas or you're dressed in your bathing suit, you feel like a beach bum. If you went to work in your pajamas, you just feel, right? If you went to work in your, decked out and dressed to the nines, if you went to a wedding dressed like, in a what do they call them? A ball gown, nightgown? No, not a nightgown, a ball gown, right? A tuxedo, then you'll feel like $1 million, right? How you dress on the outside changes how you feel on the inside. And what the Rebbe is going to say at the end of this discourse is that even though you cannot control and change your 7 emotions, by focusing on your garments, you can change the inside. You can change the 7 emotions. It's a game-changing perspective, something which we don't even learn in Tanya. It's a huge chiddush from the Rebbe. We'll be focusing on that, God willing, next Monday. Meanwhile, tomorrow morning, we'll be learning Tanya, chapter 2 of Tanya, God willing. And with that, I wish everybody a Gemara Chasima Tova, conclusion of the verdict for good this Yom Kippur on Wednesday night and Thursday. May Hashem seal us all for a life of good, health, happiness, and success. That's sweet, revealed good. And may we all only know goodness. Yeshakach, don't forget to build your sukkah. And if you need a little of an estrog, you have to order it through the Chabad right away as soon as possible. A little of an estrog, please order it right away through the Chabad. Thank you very, very much, everybody. Shalom, and have a wonderful day.